uncover and expose to view.
Naked, to be undisguised.
The Bare Naked Show?
The Bare Naked Show is a show that dares to shed light on soul trauma.
Experiences that are difficult to discuss, but necessary to promote healing. You have to touch it to heal it.
Welcome to the Bare Naked Show. I'm Dr. Simmons, psychologist, humanitarian entrepreneur, and my partner is...
Hey, everybody. It's your girl, Jae Hers, TV, radio personality, and entrepreneur. So great to have you all. Welcome to another edition of the Bare Naked Show.
Yes. We're so excited about this particular episode because this is one that we started, and it's called Caught in the Middle. And our hope for this particular episode is that we'll be able to wrap things up, put a nice little bow on it. We've got some things to talk about as it relates to finding our sense of identity and belonging, and how to really get to a place where we can incorporate both cultures. Because again, this is about being caught in the middle. So Jay, do you want to lay the premise for what it is to be caught in the middle and kind of where we've been so far?
Absolutely. So we pretty much have our journey with being caught in the middle. We talked about what being caught in the middle is. We talked about how to identify that. We talked about some of our experiences, the name calling. Did you live with Tarzan? Then so we went on also to being caught in the middle. We call it inside out, right? How our home influenced how we were, how we participated, I guess, and interacted with others, and even with some of the perceptions that we had growing up, maybe from our home, other Africans, or even, if you're from any other culture that's not American, kind of what the perception looks like, expectations. So we talked about that. And now, like Doc said, we are here where we're talking about still caught in the middle and really what that looks like. And then she said, put a really nice bow on that.
Yeah, that's beautifully done. So again, this particular episode is still caught in the middle.
Yeah.
And
question mark.
I wanted to start just by talking about, because remember, this is about touching soul traumas, right? And so when we talk about being caught in the middle, is this sense of, man, who are we really? Jay and I were both born in Liberia, basically raised here in the United States. And so we got to experience both cultures. And there are times where there's this sense of, what am I? Who am I? Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? And it's, it's a journey. I'll put it that way. But,
that's a great way. It's a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey, right? At different stages in our lives, we may have experienced things differently. But I think now as adults, and we may have different answers, or maybe we're still caught in the middle, not so sure, but we'll let you know at the end of the show where we are. But when it comes to belonging is a natural human need, right? We need to feel as though we're part of something. And without that sense of belonging, there's this isolation and kind of depressiveness, this just being wandering spirit that comes about, where it's like, I'm not fully grounded because I don't feel like I'm anchored in something, right? And so when we stay in that place for too long, it really starts to depress us a bit, and it makes us question our own identity. So I wanted to share just we're going to go through. There are several like models of acculturation, meaning how do we adjust from one culture to the other. There are several models that are out there, and I think one of the most common one is John Barry. He has a model that talks about how do we adjust into a new culture from one culture to the other. And what Jay and I are going to do is I'm going to introduce a stage of a model, talk about it, and then we're going to then integrate some examples that we have that may fit into that particular stage of a model. Okay. So this is John Barry's model of acculturation. The first thing that he talks about is when we're trying to get to a new place or to find ourselves in a new culture, we go through something called marginalization. And what marginalization is that you don't identify with or participate in either your own culture or in your host culture. Meaning, like, if I'm from Liberia, I don't want anything to do with Liberia. I don't want anything to do with the United States. I'm just doing my own thing. And this is a result of not knowing where I fit in exactly. And so because I don't know where I fit in, I just disengage with both cultures. So that's marginalization. Jay, what can you kind of what are your thoughts so far? Should we continue down the model?
I think we should continue down the model because that's like the best summation of that. Like, great example. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once we go through the stage of marginalization, again, I don't want nothing to do with either culture. I don't know where I fit in. The second stage is separation. This is when you maintain your own cultural identity and then you reject the involvement in the host cultures. This is a big one. I see this a lot. And I think we talked a little bit about this from our own personal experience and people that we know and love. But we maintain our cultural identity, but we reject involvement in the host culture. And what this looks like is, listen, I only hang out with people from my own culture. I only eat my own people's food. I only listen to my cultural music. I don't want anything to do with, where I immigrated to. I don't want anything to do with that culture. So what are some of your thoughts? And we can get into some examples around that, trying to find ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that that's really great. I was thinking about the conversation as we were kind of prepping for this because I thought of some examples and then I thought about some other cultures and how, they do that. You have, where it's important to have your community because you don't want to lose the roots. But I don't believe that that's what separation looks like, right? It's not like saying, we have the Liberians in America Association because we want to make sure that we're staying connected. We're not physically in the country, right? We're here in the US or wherever we all are in the diaspora. So we create these pockets, if you will, for us to have that commonality and to help preserve the culture, to share. And, that again, it goes back to like what you said with belonging. What I find interesting with the separatists, though, is it's like you said, I live here, right? There are people that I know and love who, like, you wouldn't know that they've been in the US for 30 plus years. Mm-hmm. And not that something is wrong with having your accent. I think that's talking like this, the integrated American talk, if you will, and not speaking Colloqua or, for those who, they come to America and they're I think we're all bilingual because I think speaking Colloqua is its own language at some point in time. We're bilingual and there's nothing wrong with that. But especially when you come here at a young age, that's not something that you just can hold on so staunchly to. That's what you hear, psychology and just how humans function and how we are. That's what we do, right? Mm-hmm. But you won't know that these people have been here. Some of these individuals have been here for 30 plus years because they sound like they just came to the US last week.
Yeah.
And I've never really understood that or, like you said, the food, they're like everything they associate with, and maybe it's with the exception of like one or two people, and it's like they're really, really, really good friends from work, maybe, or the neighbor. But apart from that, no one that they associate with, friends, family, like no one is not from that culture. And I feel like that is such a great example of the separatists.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add some little bit of psychology and research to that, one of the things that we know is that if you immigrate to a country around the age of 9, 10, and maybe even up to 11, it's much easier to lose lose your accent. I wouldn't necessarily say lose your accent per se, because we do hang on to certain aspects of that. Like I can switch up, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you could speak in such a way that someone may not necessarily know that, oh, I can speak well at brain English like this. You know what I'm saying? So to be able to fluctuate between the two. So we're looking at that, about 8 to 11, if you come to the States prior to that age, because there's still language development that's taking place. And so it's much easier for there to be some, what we call cognitive flexibility. You can absorb new information and you can kind of like integrate that into your language, right? And so you keep what you have, but you still incorporate a new language. And sometimes when you come like as a teenager, it's a little bit harder to be able to switch that, because developmentally there's already this established strength in that language center of your brain, right? And so if you're not actively trying, what's going to end up happening is you're going to keep, that's why, we have our 50-year-old friends who came when they were 20, but they still sound very, I don't like to, I say raw, but I know it sounds bad, but they still very, they still have their strong Liberian,
very strong, yes,
accent, things along that line, so that's part of the reason. It's not necessarily, it's not their fault. It's not shade in any direction. We're just saying developmentally how these things happen. But the good thing about with the separatists, there's a strong sense of identity in terms of my cultural identity from my culture that I came from, my culture of origin, right? The downside of that, though, is what you were pointing to is not necessarily incorporating the new culture, because there is a lot of stuff that you can learn from your host culture as well.
Absolutely.
So to be so isolated and such a separatist in that way, it does us a disservice. I saw this in parts of Florida, where like I went to the store and like no one spoke English. And we see this in different parts of the world, really, where it's like there's, even though you're now in the United States, but no English whatsoever. I won't point out exactly where I experienced this, but just know it was parts of Florida. And I was so shocked, because I'm like, but we're in Florida though.
Well,
so
I feel like saying it. I won't. I will have decorum. Y'all can see the nutty one, right? Because I went to this particular place last year, and I remember I was in Walmart. Walmart, okay? I was in Walmart, and I asked for help, and the associate looked at me with disdain, as if for me to have the audacity. It says, I don't speak English, and walked off. And I looked at my companion. I said, are we still in America? This is America, right? These are still the United States of America. Are we not in, blank Florida? And so, great, we both speak Spanish, like our butchered Spanish. Well, I won't say butchered. Our fluency combined, we're able to get through. But I couldn't go shopping in Walmart. Like it was crazy to me. I've never experienced that. I went shopping in Walmart.
Yep.
And I had to speak, and I was just like, oh my gosh, wow. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the signs of like that you're in an environment where there's the person in terms of their acculturation or their transition, or the community in terms of their acculturation, if they are doing that, is stuck in this separatist stage. One of the highlights is looking at you as though like, what is your problem? Why would you think I speak anything other than what I speak? And it's kind of like, well, I thought we were maybe trying to incorporate both, maybe, huh? So
yeah, it was
piece on separation. So we had marginalization and we had separation, and now the other stage that we go through is assimilation. And in assimilation, what happens is you give up your own identity and become so absorbed with your host culture. Why? Because you're trying to fit into your new environment, right? And I can relate to this particular stage, because when I first came here around the age of 11, almost 12 years old, I was so excited about being in the great United States. And I just wanted to be cool. I wanted to, I wanted the dress code. I wanted to like the music. And I didn't necessarily want much to do with Liberian culture. I mean, at home, that's all I heard, Liberian English. We ate Liberian food. I still wanted to eat our food. But but like I wasn't out here listening to the music with my friends outside of the house, So I think this was a point in my own acculturation journey that I was more an assimilation nist. I was in that phase of assimilation where it was more about absorbing as much of the host culture as I could. And it makes sense really because it's that pre-teen, teenage years where, identity is important, fitting in is important. And so for me, it was more about that than about necessarily my culture of origin. So, and this, I stayed in this space for a little while. I think up until high school or so, I would say, well, I was born in Liberia, but I've been in America for a while. You know what I mean? As a way of kind of like being like, but I am a part of this, even though I was born there, right? And so this is kind of what that stage looks like, where you're really you're very much incorporating the other culture, so much so while minimizing your own culture or completely forgetting it.
Yeah. For me, I've seen it. I don't know. I think I've maybe have. I don't even know that I had the opportunity to be an assimilator or a separatist because my parents were. It was like I lived in a separatist house, like where, like that was like not so much so like they just disregarded our host culture, but it was like I couldn't talk like this at home, and they told me because I don't want you to think like, that's all you are. Like, this is who you are. This is what you need to do so that you can survive when you're out of these walls. Right. But I do know, some people, I even have had people again, where I met someone in college. They have a very, 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 very Ghanaian name. Mm-hmm. And this gentleman told me his name, no one knows Kofi. His name was Kofi. Right. Mm-hmm. Kofi. I was like, I think it's like Friday. I don't want to mess that up. I know it's one of the days of the week. I think it's Friday. Mm-hmm. So he's like, oh yeah, I'm from Jamaica.
What?
I said, you're from where? He said, I'm from Jamaica. I said, oh, where about? He goes into, this whole spill about how, his parents were from Africa, but he's really from America. But because, he identified more with the Jamaican culture. In my brain, I really couldn't wrap my head around it because I was like, but you're not. So this is good to know. I kind of wish because I wasn't the nicest then. Thank God for the blood. But I was like, yeah, no, like, bruh, like, stop. And honestly, I have to be very honest. People who were in that phase or are in that phase, because I know some adults, I don't like that. I took offense to it, to be very honest, because no matter where you're from, and especially as an African, and especially as a Liberian, it irks my absolute nerve when I hear like, oh, well, I'm not from, I'm not from Liberia. I'm like, okay, like, okay, sure. And there's like this strong effort to, like you said, like assimilate, like to the point where even what in their mind and ideology of how Americans talk, right? It is like, I call it the Medea, like I just try to imitate it. But to like, well, hello, I'm from Chicago. Like, that's not how Americans talk.
Yeah.
You're very much a Liberian, like, own your stuff and it's okay. Nothing's wrong with being both, So so that's a great I'm gonna let you go on.
Yeah, no, so I think, I think developmentally, for me, I think this makes sense. It's really funny because when you were talking about the Jamaican thing, I remember when I came to the States, being Jamaica was more cool. And not, being African. Being African wasn't cool. We talked about the whole, African booty scratcher, why you look like this. So when people would hear that I had an accent that wouldn't place me as African. Sometimes I would get, oh, you must be from New York, because I, or you, and then they'll be like, because you got a little bit of that New York swag, and then they'll be like, oh, you must be Jamaican or from Trinidad or something. And like, I remember being 12 years old and being like, like not correcting them and being like, no, I'm Liberian. But in my heart, like, I'm Liberian though. You know what I'm saying? Like my friends knew I was Liberian, but like if random people were like, oh, you must be from New York. I'm like, yeah, I'm from New York. You know what I'm saying? Or you must be, just like that. Because again, it's this idea of like, I want to go where it's cool. So I think that this is a matter of kind of incorporating, it's our journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's where, and I want to point that out for me, and especially I think, and again, I'm not the professional. That's why it's great that you are here for us having this conversation. Because I think for me, my understanding level, if you will, is you're a child and you're developing at a point of an adult, and not an adult that just came over, but an adult who, like me or you, we've been here, and growing up. And I feel like, and again, I can't determine what a person's development should be, but I think that maybe that is something we're talking about, soul trauma, and really looking at things as to how, whether you're being a separatist, honestly, or that you just are told you either like on an extreme, to really look into that, because like you said, there are things we can benefit from the separatists. There are things you can benefit from your host culture, and for the person who is assimilating, and again, you're still kind of totally disregarding your culture, that there are fundamental wonderful things within your culture that you benefit from, so
and I think what I would say is, now that we are adults and we've experienced life and we've taken several steps into this journey, it's easier to look back. I when I think of my acculturation journey, I don't think I see it the way that I see it now, So each stage you're going through something, and there's an obstacle, there's an identity situation that you're trying to master. And so, and I can kind of put a bow on it later at the end, but I think that I see things differently now. And as we jump into the integration phase, I think it would make sense, the point I was going to make. So integration is basically where you maintain your own cultural identity, while also participating in your host culture. So I know who I am, but I'm also actively engaged in my host culture. I have learned to integrate both cultures to form my own sense of self, that I don't have to be Liberian. I don't have to just be all American. We're Liberian American. The both of us are Liberian American, right? Because we've gotten to experience both cultures. And I think that at this particular phase, what happens is that people come to embrace both cultures, right? As a result of developing a strong sense of identity. You see, because I know who I am, because I can appreciate the good, bad, and ugly about my culture, I can be okay with it while actively participating in my host culture and incorporating things that I love and things that maybe not so great about the culture, but appreciating both for what they have to offer me. Right. Absolutely. And for me personally, I think it was in my either senior year or freshman year of college, I would say probably college, that I really got a good sense of this integration, where it's like, okay, I love being Liberian. I love that I can speak Colloquial. I love that that I can dress a certain way, eat a certain food, but also I love my American experience and being in the culture, because there's so much there. So finally getting a chance to bring the two and really appreciate them both. I would say probably my freshman year of college was when I fully became like at this stage of integration.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I think a word you used before was the hybrid. And I like that. One of the things, as we're discussing, is a point that I want to make sure that I bring out again, because we're talking about, how this is. And for me, and for, it may be someone in the audience may have the same question or opinion. I don't know. Something that a point I brought out is that the hybrid, or the one who integrates, It's you, and you said that it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's everything about my cultures that I embrace. And one of the things that I find offensive is how people, being African is popular now, right? Africa became the thing a few years ago, especially mainstream trendy when Black Panther.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever. Oh my gosh. I was inundated with questions about Wakanda, and I was like, I'm from Liberia, so I can give you some things about my country, but I don't know Wakanda, right? I appreciate the appreciation. And there's no shade there. And again, nothing of what I'm saying is shade, but it's definitely, I think, a point that I want to bring out, that those who pick to say, oh, I'm African because it's cool, or just for the cool things, but totally, disregard that there are things that we have to work on, or the American because this is the cool thing, but totally, again, disregard that there are certain things that we still have to work on. And that, I think all those things encompass the culture. So, and you gave me an answer, and I think I would love for you, if you don't mind sharing that, because as we're understanding, and even talking about the spectrum and getting to our healing, I think that that's really something good for all of us to hear.
Yeah. So not that I remember my answer, but
talk about the spectrum, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's where I was going to go with it. I think that, ultimately, even though I highlighted 4 stages in John Barry's model, there is a continuum and there's a spectrum there, right? And it's cool now to be African. So people are, kind of on the, like, what, African? But when I came to the States, it wasn't cool, So it made sense that I would try to suppress some of my Africanness, in an effort to kind of fit in, right? But I think that there are those individuals who pull certain aspects, like the good, for their culture, and then they take that as their own. But ultimately, we want to get to a stage where we can fully identify with the good, bad, and in between of both cultures, because that's just the reality of what it is, And again, it's a matter of where each person is on their journey of acculturation. And we want to land where we can fully identify as, I have a strong sense of cultural identity, but at the same time, I again appreciate my host culture, and I've learned so much, and I've integrated that into who I am as a person.
Absolutely. So, questions, and this question is for you. The question is for me. Okay. How do you feel when people say you are too American to be African, or vice versa, too African to be American?
Woo. I think that's a good one. Listen, in the past, when people would say that to me, it annoyed me. I think one of the things I heard more than the other way around was I heard I'm too American to be African. Like, I'm not African enough, right? I've heard everything from, you sound too proper, you sound like a white girl, you dance like a white girl, you act like a white girl, whatever that looks like or sounds like. And that would really, it would annoy me, to be quite honest. In the past, it would really annoy me. But I think now, when I hear that, my question is, what is it to be African, and what is it to be American? So conceptualize that for me, because there's not one structure, there's not one framework for being African or being American, right? But rather, I just am who I am. I'm confident in my Liberianness, and I'm confident in my American experience, and so it doesn't bother me as much anymore. I use that as an opportunity to educate, but it used to be very annoying.
Yes.
How about you? Kind of, what's your sense now when people say that to you?
I still get annoyed. Yeah. I have to, it's very annoying. It's annoying either way for me. And I feel like I've gotten it both ways. Mm-hmm. I get you're not African. You don't look African. You don't even sound African. So, oh gosh. Yeah. It's the, and I'm like, well, what do Africans look like? How do you sound African? Yeah. I had someone tell me, like, are you like saying you're African because of your ancestors? And I'm like, well, Yes, because of my ancestors and because that is where I am born. Like that's I'm from the continent. My country is Liberia. And and then again the other side of the spectrum, I've had someone tell me that I shouldn't even call myself a Liberian because I came here too early to know anything about Liberia. And I find it interesting. This individual who made this comment can't cook Liberian food, cannot speak one dry lick of colloquy. Then you open your mouth to come talk about me. Hey, respect yourself, my friend. So it's like the audacity. I have gotten to the point, and sometimes, for the most part, where it is a moment to educate. But then sometimes, I've had my moments where I cannot tell a lie, where it's just like it irks me, because it's like the audacity to say that this is not who I am or what I am, and who gives you? I think that's the thing that's always bothered me. Maybe is like who made you the authority on what being African is, right? Or what being American is. Like, who deemed you the authority? What gave you these credentials to tell me, what I am not or what I am? Yeah. So, and as I grow in my own journey, I strive to use that definitely as a moment to educate, because the conversations have to continue to happen. And like you said, we're all on various spectrums of, or parts of wherever the spectrum is, in, different places in our journey. So.
And I think, it's a matter of the fact that people have a certain framework that, it's really stereotypical type behaviors, right? And even when people say African, I'm always like, it's an entire continent, though, so, and we're so diverse, even in our little tiny part of the world. In Liberia, 4 million people, there are 16 different languages and tribes and dialects. So,
and then there's like the subsects of those dialects, it's like,
yeah.
I don't know every Liberian, okay? I do not know every Liberian. I don't know every Liberian, so I don't know every African. I'm sorry that you went to the braid salon and someone said something. They may be Guinean. They may not be. They may be from Senegal. Parlez-vous français un petit? Okay, like they speak a totally different language, and I did that because that's something that I don't represent the continent. I don't even try to perpetrate that I represent my entire country. And I understand that, when you're a part of something, you represent it to some extent. And I strive to represent in a way that the way I carry myself, because how I carry myself should be a good representation of, first and foremost, my God, my home, my country, and my host, my cultures, because, I may be the only thing someone sees from anywhere else that is American, and the only thing someone sees from anywhere else that is Liberian. So I definitely understand that. But when you got to that generalization of the continent is,
that I can see that gets you going. That gets you going. And, and it really is. It's frustrating, and it took a while to get to a place where we can use that as a point of education. I think that sometimes when people do it, they're doing it out of ignorance. They just don't know. And then, but when I think it becomes more annoying when it's your own people, like if it's another Liberian that's saying, "Oh, you're not you're not Liberian enough." Like I don't want to put anybody on the spot. But, being with someone who knows a lot of people in the Liberian community and is very Liberian in nature, sometimes it's a little bit, friends may come around and be like, "Oh, your wife, is she Liberian?" And it's like, what else am I going to be? Like, I could be anything else, but like, I really am Liberian. "Oh, she don't look Liberian." And it's like, what does a Liberian look like? And then they try to narrow it down to like tribes. I'm like, I'm really hybrid. Like, my mom is Mana Mandingo. My dad is Gribble Basso Crewman. So you're not going to identify a particular tribe within me. You're just going to be a hybrid breed. That's who I am. And I'm okay with that. But they try to even like pin you into a little, pigeonhole you into a little spot when it comes to identity. And I'm just like, I'm just Sweetie Simmons. That's it. That's who I am. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. So integration. So where do you think you are? Like when we think about these stages, right? Just as when we think about these kind of stages of acculturation, marginalization, where you don't identify with either cultures, not your own or the other. Separation, where you just keep your culture, your host culture, nothing to do with you keep your origin, your culture of origin, nothing to do with the host culture. And then assimilation, where you're so busy trying to fit into the host culture where you dismiss your own. And integration, where we're now fully incorporating both, like because we have a strong sense of who we are. Where do you think you fall, and where do you think you are even now?
That's an amazing question. For me, I do believe that I'm at a space of integration, and I think that integration was someone that alluded to it earlier, kind of forced on me. Growing up, because like I didn't have, and I was fairly young when I came to the States. So when you talked about development and how that happens psychologically, I was young. I was a little girl, so formally educated here in the States, but living in a very integrated household, to the fact that, as I said, how we talked and everything else was aware that, you are in America, and these are the things, parents pointing out all those things we talked about in previous episodes. So for me, integration is definitely where I am. I think phases of it, and now to the point of where fully accepting. And I think I maybe wasn't fully integrated because there are things that, I didn't like about my culture as a Liberian. There were things I didn't like about my culture as an American. And, even one of the things when someone's like, well, are you African or American? And I still tell people I'm very much African. And if anything, I am an African American. But I definitely think integration is where I am at this point in my life.
Yeah. That's so funny. And I think maybe that's a true sense of where we are when it comes to same year. I really do think, like I mentioned, college is really where I learned to be more integrated. And when people ask me that question, do you consider yourself African American? I always say I'm African. And they look at me like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I really am though. I specifically say I'm Liberian. And they're like, and I'm like, yeah, but that's who I am. That's what I am. And if anything, as you mentioned, I think true to the sense African American is what is what we are. It's just African in nature, American in my growth, and it's my upbringing. And I absolutely love both cultures, the good, bad, and ugly. And it's an honor for me. It's a privilege to have participated in both cultures and get the richness of them both. And I just think it makes you a well-rounded individual when you're able to get to that place of integration. So really, that's where we are. So that's our show. This is our show. It's all about being caught in the middle. We wanted to educate you all. Ultimately, we wanted to educate you on this whole idea of identity and cultural identity. And am I too African to be American? Too American to be African? Who am I? What am I? Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? And it made sense for us to end the series kind of educating us on, stages of acculturation and where each of us may fall. And I would want to encourage us to get to a place where we can really love and appreciate our culture, where we're from, regardless of where you're from. Whether it's what we talked about, Jay, my friends that are from other parts of the world experience that also, whether it's Chinese American, whether it's, they're from India, they're from Pakistan, they're from Iran, just trying to get a sense of who am I in my host culture. And this is something that all of us can relate to, where it's
Absolutely.
like, I want to keep my sense of identity, but I also want to embrace my host culture, because both have something to offer in my development and in this journey called life.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a great point that you brought out, Doc. It's very true. We all go through that. And I would even say within, I want to even kind of go dive in a little bit deeper, right? I know this isn't African American with the topic, but it ties in because that is a community that is, there's a subset from my experience being here in America. It's almost like there's this whole different culture of the African American community and the African American culture, and having family members who maybe are integrated racially to figure out, where do I fit in? I think that this is a context, again, to really pull in and to understand and embrace it. We all have something beautiful and amazing and wonderful to offer. We can't all think alike. We would not be so colorful. We would not be so rich as humans, and this world would not be the beauty that it is. Half of the potential that we see, we couldn't do it. We couldn't progress. I think you said this before. We can't move forward if everyone has the same thought process. There's just no way for progression. So embrace both sides, and because we're human, we're not always pretty all the time, right? Not saying in our outer appearance, but just the things that we do, we are flawed. That is a human thing. So it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with embracing one part of your culture, because there's maybe some flawed parts of history or certain things that may have happened. And I'm speaking specifically to those who are biracial, with sometimes some of the climate, that the things that have happened, especially here in the US, of all these various current events and things that have been happening. I had someone actually have a conversation with me where they said, I love my white family and I love my Black side of my family, but I feel torn. And it resonated for me because I could understand, because when, we're talking about the people, the separatists, when I've sat with them and sometimes I've been angered because of some of the things that I hear. And I'm like, well, then get out of the country. Like nobody's touching me. I'm so infuriated, right? But I felt that because they're in there and they're with some of their qualms for why they don't want to be too Americanized because of things that have happened in history and so forth. I understand that, right? But that's not all there is to the history. So what we do is we take the good, the bad, and everything else, and we embrace it, and then we find where we fit in. And that's how I think we can find that stronger sense of our own identity, that this is a part of me, right? I am a part, I belong here. This is all a part of what's in me and who I am and where my foundation comes from. And then you can progress and make your own contribution. You can make your own stamp, and you can, help change some of the narrative, if you will, educate, either side, because if nothing else, you may just be the gap for bridging that, or the bridge rather in that gap. You're that piece to pull together those sides that may not have full understanding to really come together.
Yeah. So I have nothing else. I have nothing else to add. I think, ultimately that was beautifully stated, beautifully said. I think when it comes to the issue of biracial sense of identity, that's a whole nother piece, because our family is very, very much integrated in that way. We're very rainbow. So maybe at some point we can think about a show just for that, and maybe bringing our biracial couples on and the families and what that sense is like, because that's a whole nother topic, and the process there looks very different for that particular individual as well, even though you can pull some things that we talked about here, but just in terms of identity, it looks a little different for them, and it can be a challenge, and I think a lot of times that gets overlooked. So belonging, fitting in somewhere, finding our sense of who we are is just a critical piece of being human. And
Yes.
we wanted to touch on it a little bit. So listen, feel free to leave a comment, give us any questions that you may have. You can send it to our messenger or leave it on our page. We'll be happy to circle back to it and give you any questions, comments, answers, whatever feedback we have. We will be sure to answer those things or to give them to you. But again, this is the Bare Naked Show with Dr. Simmons and Jae Hers. It's been a pleasure being with you all. I hope you enjoyed our series on Caught in the Middle. Bye.